Next part of this tutorial is related to rollup. In particular, it means that we will implement now OLAP data in cube format in the relational database. There are different approaches how it can be implemented, or there are three schemas that can be used for implementation. First is the star schema, and in this schema we have several tables in the database. One of the tables is the fact table. So this table, it includes all the measures we see here. This red columns, the measures, and then every record in this fact table, it also has foreign keys to another tables, so these foreign keys, they establish relationships to another tables, and this in another tables, they are nothing different than dimensions. So we see here table time, it's of course time dimension, branch, some branch dimension, item, it's product dimension, and so on. Quite similar to star schema is snowflake schema, but in this schema, dimension tables, they can have relationships to further tables, so that it's like dimensions of dimensions. And in this tutorial, we will implement star schema in Power Pivot, because Power Pivot, it can be considered as a relational database. We will do it for audio store, the one similar database or very alike database that we worked on the previous tutorial. We are asked to analyze the sales data by employee, customer, and date. So employee, customer, and date will be 3 dimensions. The final result should be pivot table that loads data from Power Pivot and that shows performance of every employee in a graphical form. And this, so with the help of these circles of different color, and the circles, they are KPIs. We'll see how can we implement KPIs as well. So the steps that we want to perform is first identify the facts and measures and dimensions that we want to use. Then we will import the data from Access database to the Power Pivot, and then we will prepare KPIs and pivot table. First, the dimensions and hierarchies. We will take data from invoice transactions from the database, and we will take 2 measures, or we define 2 measures. This is total sales amount in currency, in money, and a number or count of tracks sold. Then for analysis of the data, we will apply 3 dimensions. It's time dimension, which has which hierarchy has 3 levels, year, month, date. Then customer dimension, and its hierarchy has 4 levels, like geographical levels, country, state, city, and then second name of the specific customer, and employee. The third dimension, it doesn't have any hierarchy. Employee will be represented simply by the name. So that's how the star schema in Power Pivot should look like. We will have fact sales table with total and track count measures, and time key, customer key, employee key as foreign keys to the dimension table. Let's now go to the data import. We will do data import in the same way as we did on the last tutorial. So for that, we need an Excel file. Power Pivot database is stored in Excel file. I just create some new Excel worksheet. I open it. Okay, and we defined the Power Pivot model in the Power Pivot window. So on the Power Pivot tab in Excel, I choose Manage to manage Power Pivot. And here I will import the data. It says that customer and employee data should be imported utilizing graphical interface simply. So in the Power Pivot table on Home tab, I choose from Database and from Access. And then database name, I just browse to the audio store for OLAP Access database. Double click on it, test connection, the same as we did last time. Everything is all right. Then next. Here I choose this option, select from a list of tables. So use the graphical interface. And we need to get data from two tables, customer and employee. So should be customer and employee. And then every table I want to filter. Basically, I want to choose for the employee specific columns, only that which I need, and specific employees. So for the employee, I want to get employee ID, last name, and title. I deselect all the columns and then select employee ID, last name, and title. I will not filter now by title. Let's import all the employees. And for the customer, I choose columns last name, city, country. So it's customer ID, last name, city, and country. Okay, so now I can press finish to make the import. I can already see two new tables, and let's rename it to dim customer and dim employee so that we have the exact same names. Dim customer, dim employee. Now the information about invoice for the table TBL invoice. So the table invoice, we need to import as a fact sales. So we will rename table invoice as fact sales. And for that, we use this SQL query provided. So again, I will go to the Power Pivot window, but now I choose from database, from Access, browse to the same database. And on the next screen, instead of the first option, I choose the second option, next. And here I insert this query provided. And I write the name for this query fact sales. So that the name which is created based on this query has the name fact sales. And press, I can validate, everything is correct, then press finish. Okay, I trust the source. Never saw it before actually. And then close. So now we have fact sales table. Next step is to add dimension date. So this table with all the dates. We can do it different ways. For example, we could specify this data on the Excel worksheet and then just copy paste the data. But there is a function in Power Pivot to add this table with dates automatically. And it can be accessed on the Design tab in Power Pivot window. Choose Date Table, New. That's exactly what it will do. It will create some table with dates. And you see now we have here all the possible dates. And I will rename it to dim date to correspond to the structures that we want to prepare. Dim date. So dim date we added, and now we are asked to add as a next step the hierarchy. So we will have two hierarchies. It's date hierarchy and customer hierarchy. Let's go back to the Power Pivot. On the Home tab, I can choose Diagram View to see everything in a graphical form. And then we are asked first to add hierarchy for the customer. When I go to this table or put my cursor on this table, I see here small icon on the top right corner, which says create hierarchy. So I create this hierarchy, and now I need to provide it name. It will be called customer hierarchy. And to add attributes as levels to this hierarchy, I simply drag and drop them. So I choose first country and drag to the customer hierarchy, then city, and then a last name. And the order of these attributes is the levels of hierarchy. I need to do the same for dimension date if necessary, because probably, yes, it was created automatically. For employee and for sales, for fact table, we don't need to create hierarchies. For employee, we also don't need to create any hierarchies. The next step is to create relationships between the tables. So we have now all the tables, fact table and dimension tables. Now we want to establish connections between them. Since we built a star schema, connections, they go from the fact main table to each of the dimension table. So the time key, it's basically the date. So it's the foreign key, which goes to the primary key date in dim date table. Then customer key, it's customer ID in customer table, and employee, it is employee ID. That's what we have. Let's check on the illustration. So we created hierarchies, or one hierarchy. We established relationships. And as the next step, we will create a KPI. KPI is the short of key performance indicator. The evaluation of some measure in Power Pivot in Cube data. To create KPI, I go to the Power Pivot window, and on the Home tab, in Calculations, I see that Create KPI is grayed out. And the reason why it's grayed out, because we create KPIs for measures. And as for now, we didn't define any measures in our model. So I will define it. We need to create KPI for the counts of tracks sold by every employee, but for the simply count of tracks. Therefore, I will create the measure, which will be called track count, the same of the column, track count, column equal, it is calculated as a sum of values in track count column. So sales track count column. After I create this measure, create KPI should be now should have the color dark black. Yes, I press create KPI. KPI based field is track count, so it's this measure. Then define target value. We'll define it as the absolute value. And in the task description, it's mentioned that the target value is basically 15. 15 tracks sold per year or per month, I don't remember. It's considered to be a target and a good value. So when I entered here the number, can I press now? I press enter, and then here my target value is, so here is 15. It's really green. It's some good value. And I want to, so here I can decide which icon will be used for this KPI when I add it to the pivot table. Circles are all right. I want to change, I don't know, do I need to change? Let's see. It was 6 and 12. So let's change these values. They are the same. So everything what is under 6, all the cells under 6, they will be considered as bad, as red, and values between 6 and 12, they will be okay. So it's yellow. Then icons, I see that in the solution we have these icons. So I will click on them to choose this icon. Now let's press OK. We are done with model definition part. So I can save Power Pivot results and close the Power Pivot window and go to the Excel window. Now I want here to add data from the database. I will do it with the help of pivot table. So I choose Insert, Pivot Table, and then use this workbook's data model or Power Pivot data model, correct? Add it to the existing worksheet. It's also correct. Now my final result should look like this. So I have in rows names of the employees. I can choose the year of report. Here is the month, and then for every month so this 15 it was per month. Sales per month should be, if there are 15 or more, it's green, so it's a good value. So let's first add employee last name to the rows. Then I see that here in this prototype we have a title of the employee as a filter. I will do exactly the same title, add to the filters. We want to filter employees by salesperson only. So let's apply this sales support agent. This is the correct filter. Last tutorial, we applied this filter, so to say, during the import. Now we want to add as values. So I go to the fact table, which here, since it's not real cube data, it's just emulation of the cube data. We see here icons are tables. We can add track count as values. interestingly, I don't see the KPIs that we defined. Let's try to update the data, because KPI should be here, but it's not. I will go back to Power Pivot and see what happened with here. I can also access KPIs from Excel menu. So let's go to manage KPIs. Somehow that KPI didn't save in this file, so I will create it again. New measure track count, absolute value 15, target 612. Yes, I press save, but somehow okay. Now when you see, it was before only the measure here, but now there is a traffic light sign, and it means that it's so slow. Okay, Excel is now back to life. So before we had here the measure, and now this measure changed, measure sign, some sign changed to something that looks like a traffic light. And then when I look what is inside this traffic light, I see here three elements. First, it's value. It's the exact measure, value of this measure. Then I can add status. And if I add a status, we see that icon, which we defined before. So since total sales for all the years for every employee more than 15, of course, this status is green. But now we want to aggregate this data not for all the years, but for every month. So for that, I add to the pivot table slicer, and it's not a normal slicer, but slicer for dates, for timeline. Here I go to all, and in the dimension I choose date and then date. Now here in this slicer I can choose by what I want to make a filter, and I want to filter not by months but by years. This years, months, and so on, it's taken from the dim date table. I can choose here 1 year, 2010, for example. Can I choose 2011? Yes, the value updates. But then here I want to, in the pivot table itself, I want to see not the totals for 2010, but all data aggregated by months. That's what I was asked in the exercise. So I go back to the list of fields, to dim date table, and here I drop months to the columns from the date hierarchy. Okay, I drop now the whole hierarchy. So what I want to do, I want to drill down, operation drill down to the month. So I press with right mouse on 2010 and choose here drill down. It will now go down to months. But then, so how you can interpret it, we now went down to months, and you see our slicer, it now all the years now selected here. I want to select January not for all months, not for all years, but for 2010. So I choose here in the filter only 2010, and now I see the value for January 2010, and every row it's the employee. So Johnson, he sold 34 tracks, and that's why the status is green. And Peacock employee, he sold in January 2010 4 tracks, so his status is red. We can now, to be completely to have completely the same result as in the exercise, we can now leave only the status icons in the pivot table. So I drag away track count and leave only track count status. And here is the pivot table, which graphically represents the sales performance of employees in 2010. This is 2011. Yes, 2012, and so on. So this was the second part where we imported data from the database. We transformed this data in a way that it looks as a star schema, and then we use the star schema in our analysis of employee performance. So this was it for today, and have a nice day, and goodbye.